I'm not being an activist, but what do you say to your critics?
Again, you're being an activist. I am
not. That's not appropriate, sir.
Who are you with? What's your name?
That's an appropriate question for you to ask.
You're going to ask how many questions? You get 3?
What a stupid son of a bitch.
Good morning, Liberty lovers, Liberty curious, and anyone else tuning in to Friendly Fire this morning. If you're watching live, then let me especially thank you for tuning in so early. This show is dedicated to interviewing libertarian candidates running for office and only libertarian candidates. As the name suggests, candidates maybe ask some tough questions, but as a fellow libertarian, I'm not here to make them look foolish or fail. I'm simply raising the bar for interviewing candidates, as well as the expectation for candidates. Libertarian Party is the third largest political party in the United States and the only viable option to compete with the big two. In this episode, I bring on Matt Hackenburg, who is the Libertarian candidate for governor of Pennsylvania. Let's bring Matt in. Matt, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
Very well, and glad you made it in. You were having some internet troubles. Hopefully that's gotten itself resolved.
First, we woke up this morning with no internet, so we had to just fire and go from there. So I think we're all
Gotcha. Right. Awesome. Well, I'm glad you made it and glad we're here. So let's dig right in. Tell us just quickly who Matt is, why he's running for Pennsylvania governor.
Well, Matt Hackenburg is a longtime libertarian, and I'm running for governor because I think now is the most opportune time to do so, and I'm quite excited to do so. And I'm one of my daughter is here. She's my mother's not home from work yet, so she's like might be jumping in on us.
Gotcha. No worries. Hey, this is Liberty Dad, and I've had my son jump in on the shows every now and then. And then there's been a couple where he's actually sitting right next to me because I was on dad duty at the time I needed to record.
Yeah. Mommy's still at work, so we're doing daddy duty, which we always enjoy. And actually, Absolutely. If you want to know the reason why I'm running for governor, and this is the reason why I'm running for governor, to be honest, and this is why I joined the Libertarian Party. We went through the Rona, and we saw that nightmare, that disaster. We see that. I was considering myself an anarchist before the Rona. That just really opened my eyes to how much the two-party system does not care about us. That does not care about us at all, and it's a horribly broken system. And I have to do something. Right. You know, I have a child, and I don't want the child to grow up thinking that this is normal. That having the governor can come on TV any day of the week and tell you what you can or cannot do, whether you can go outside and see your friends or not. And
right.
Let that be normal, and we need to make that change. So, someone has to do something, and I figured, well, here I am. Might as well do it.
Right. And has it been fun so far?
It's been a lot of fun, actually. Yeah, it's I never thought myself as someone who run for politics. I like politics from a purely like a nerdy standpoint, just a geeky standpoint. Yeah. I never thought I'd like to do it, but it turns out I do enjoy it. I do like talking to people. I do like engaging people about it. I like spreading these ideas. I think they are very powerful message that we have the ability to convey this message, that we have the duty to do so.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was one of the things that I saw. And over at so I did my research, and PAFamilyVoter.com had some questions that you filled out. And one of the things that you mentioned, here's what you said in part to the answer of why you're running for office. You said, after the horrific handling of the coronavirus in Pennsylvania, the lockdowns, the mandates, the abuse of our children and families, and the havoc the response had on all of our lives, I couldn't help but accept the Libertarian Party's nomination. I have a message of liberty to spread, and it's my duty to do so. So I was curious, can you expand on duty? Is it just about family, or is it something more to you?
So, part of it is about family, but it is more than that. I've long felt this duty to community, right? The people around me, the people that make the world what it is. Those that we love, and either directly or indirectly. That's why I joined part of the reasons why I joined the Army National Guard when I was younger. Contrary to a lot of this mainstream narrative that we libertarians only care about ourselves, it's like, no, I care about other people. I care about other humans tremendously. I just don't think the government does at all, and I don't think that using the government to the government is an effective means of caring for others. So
Right.
I think duty to others starts at home and starts with your family, with your community, and goes out from there. And the government is never a solution to caring for others or providing for others.
Right. No, I agree. I think that like right now, I think this is kind of like my duty to kind of present candidates as much as I can, promote candidates in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
What made it my duty? As an officer of the party, I was just like, I want to see more candidates being recognized and being heard from. And I said, if the media is not going to do it, then I'm sitting here with this podcast. It's kind of my duty to do it. I've already kind of put in this allegiance to the party by becoming an officer.
Mhm.
And that's what a party does. We run candidates. So therefore, I kind of took it upon myself as a duty. So I hear you, man. And, I'm kind of missing my son now. I'm like wishing he was over here jumping around, we could.
And she's like, well, now I'm going to be on. Now I'm going to be on the camera. I'm going to be on the camera a lot.
Right. So like, mine's asleep. So, or maybe he's asleep. I'm not really sure, but he's with his mama right now. So, but all right. So okay. So following that, then, as libertarians, we oppose mandates and lockdowns. And you describe it as the horrific handling of the coronavirus. So let's just kind of start there. What would you have done instead?
Nothing.
And describe what they did in Pennsylvania, because I'm in Florida, so I don't really know what all the other states did necessarily.
Right. So Pennsylvania is one of the states where the governor made the news for sending sick people to nursing homes and killed 9,000 people as a result. Our wonderful governor, Wolf, and I obviously wouldn't have done that, amongst other things. We had the same thing where we had to turn on the TV every morning and find out who's essential and who's not essential, and who can go out and who can set forth and who's supposed to stay home. And this is madness, which I thought was madness from the very beginning.
Right.
And as governor, I obviously wouldn't do that. I might go back and forth whether how much I would permit like local town governments to do that. I go back and forth whether the duty of the state has any duty in defending liberty. I don't think the state has any incentive to defend liberty, so I'm generally against that idea. But if I were governor, I couldn't stand by and allow people being oppressed under my watch. But I would never support the government doing that as a whole.
Right.
But otherwise, and really, by and large, nothing. Maybe provide some advisement of people what to think and what to do, and let people make their own choices, as always should be the case.
Right. And you mentioned the nursing homes. If I recall correctly, Pennsylvania also that coincided with the there was a notable person, and I don't remember her name. Drawing a blank, but didn't you have a transgender
we did. Yes.
Health.
Levine, Rachel Levine,
yes,
who's now who magically got promoted to the rank of admiral upon joining the Biden administration, which is offensive on so many levels. But that's
was the nursing home debacle a decision that she played a role in making?
I do believe so. Yeah, I do believe so.
What could the governor have done? Like just say no, or is that was that a decision that was solely the governor's to make, or you're like what's the breakup of at least the authority level?
Appointed someone based on competency and not based on meaning some woke quota. That's
okay.
Number one for starters. I mean, if you ever listen to her talk, she's not the sharpest knife in the drawer.
Right.
So clearly she's there purely for, the diversity, inclusion, and equity purposes, and not there for actually be a competent, healthcare provider.
Right. Okay. I was just curious because I was like, that sounds familiar. I'm trying to remember, and I'm just trying to look up because I thought I had made some tweets about it, and I was taking a look. I wasn't prepared for that one because I forgot all about Dr. Levine. And let's see, the Secretary of Health. That was her role.
Yep.
And I remember in a WebEx meeting, and I posted this back in January of 2021. Let's see, in a WebEx meeting, some of the highlights were, I'm trying to see if there's anything of interest here that we can discuss. I know they were working, she was working with the CDC on a tracking act, Tiberius. Did that ever come to fruition?
Not that I know. That's a good question. No, nothing I'm aware of.
Yeah.
We don't have anything. Said Pennsylvania. We are a very culturally diverse state. We have the East Coast, which is right along People's Republic of New Jersey. And we have the spillover that you would expect from there, especially in the Philadelphia area. But I'm up north, further up north in the Northeast, and it's quite rural, quite more the right-leaning conservative area. And the bulk of the state is like that. As much states you would expect. Most states are fairly conservative, very in the more rural areas, and then get more democratic in the more densely populated areas. So. And we are a Commonwealth, so there's a lot of county and pulling a blank on the word. Wow, I can't speak. It's early yet. I haven't had my coffee.
Right. No, I understand.
There's a lot of counties have a lot of their own say and on their own direction. And at first, everyone was going along with it, but I think as time went on, there's increased pushback. And really, we have a very diverse state in terms of culture. Actually diverse. Western Pennsylvania is much more independent minded. We have the middle of the state, which is part of the Appalachian Mountains, which is areas that are incredibly independently minded, which aren't going to go along with these lockdowns. So Wolf could jump up and down and scream whatever kind of tracking app he wanted to do, whatever kind of lockdowns he wanted to do, and people are going to tell him to go pound salt, and that's
right.
But in my mind, which is what eventually happened, is that no one was going to go along with it. So we backed down before we saw New Jersey or New York do the same.
Gotcha. So following this, you saying, hey, I wouldn't have really done anything, and I would have potentially prevented like the Secretary of Health and Human Services or what have you from doing some of the things or, that were within the scope of their authority. My understanding is that that hospitals were facing real challenges, right? And there was a sharp rise in deaths at some point. So considering the sharp rise in deaths and the shortages that hospital faced that were very real, like how would you have handled those kind of things? Because they did require something, did they not?
I mean, that's a very good question. I'm not entirely sure. I don't know how much the state's involvement helped with that. There were, I think some areas were of greater use of hospital. We on the East Coast here, I actually have friends who work in healthcare. My wife is a nurse, in fact. I have other friends as well who work in the hospitals along the East here, and they had a major influx of people from New Jersey coming over to our hospitals. So I don't know. I honestly don't know how much of a strain on the hospital systems there were, as we saw throughout the country, where emergency hospitals, field hospitals were set up rapidly. Their use was almost non-existent.
Right.
A lot of the problems they had in healthcare was due to an overreaction or inappropriate reaction to this healthcare crisis. But at the end of the day, a lot of healthcare limitation, when they say like beds available, that's not a number of physical beds. It's not the availability of healthcare providers, the nurses and doctors and aides and things like that. And Pennsylvania, this is a libertarian podcast, so people are probably more aware of like certificate of need laws. Pennsylvania does not have a certificate of need.
Oh, okay.
So we do allow people to invest in their own facilities without permission from their competitors, which is nice. But by and large, if we really, from a government standpoint, what needs to happen is licensing laws need to be heavily revoked or heavily curtailed. I don't think there should be any occupational licensure. I think the employer, the hospitals, or doctors' offices and everything in between are much more apt to deciding what qualifications are necessary for their employees, whether it be nurses and doctors and everything else of that like. I don't think the state should be involved in that kind of licensure. I think all that does is creates this this limiting funnel where we're now paying nurses $1,000 a day, $1,000 a shift to work because we don't have enough.
Wow.
And that's nothing to do with buildings. It's nothing to do with not having enough hospitals. It's just not having enough people to fill those roles.
Right.
Because we have these education requirements, which are onerous. We have these very strict schooling entrance requirements.
Mm-hmm.
And then once nurses get into the field, they get hammered. They get too many hours dumped on them, too many requirements on them. They're treated poorly, and then resulting in these extremely high prices, which is further on the demand distortion driven by Obamacare and this third party payer system where we have healthcare providers which are incentivized to accept higher costs and just push higher premiums onto their customers. So now you have we see this all across the country. This isn't just in Pennsylvania,
right?
We see just healthcare prices going up and up and up and up and up, and there's no incentive to keep it down. That's just the profit incentive for health insurance companies,
right?
So and it's how do you fix that? I mean, like one, I said licensure, restrict, limited. Remove limits on licensure, let employers decide who they hire for what, and go from there.
I got you. It seems like government has a tendency to do one thing, which requires them to do yet another, which requires yet another thing and another thing. And it seems like it's never ending. Right. And, and there's only so much that they can do because they're at some limitation because they've got laws and bureaucracy and all these other things. Whereas the free market has, if it were more of a free market than it is now, then it would actually have a lot more availability to resolve some of these answers. So I want to move on and talk about your opponents. In 2018, there were 4 candidates on the ballot. There was a Republican, a Democrat, a Green Party, and a Libertarian. This year, there are 5. The same 4 parties, plus a candidate from the newly formed Keystone Party. And that Keystone Party candidate, Joe, and I don't know if I'll say his name correctly, Solosky, ran for state treasurer as a Libertarian in 2020, and he received 2.2% of the vote. And then House of Representatives for Pennsylvania in 2018, getting 2.9% of the vote. So what I want to know is, how do you think the additional candidate will impact the race for you, especially since he's coming from the Libertarian Party? And what are you doing to not lose Libertarian votes?
Well, I mean, so, Joe Solosky was, part of the Libertarian Party. I mean, he's more of like I want to say professional politician, Libertarian politician. He was part of the formation of the Keystone Party, and I think it had too much drama as a result of the major change in cultural direction of the, if you will. And the group of people spun off. They're people who are more interested in playing politics and not so much in actually bringing about change to the world. So, he does the same thing. Like, he has the same kind of message, which would have been great in 2016, right? Is, we need to cut back our state spending by 5% and things like that. And it's like, that's great, guys. But here we are. Like, this is like, we are facing like major changes in our society and our culture. This is like revolution times. Like, this is like major changes in U.S. history. And it's not 2016 anymore. We can't be campaigning like 2016 anymore. We need to be talking about, like, this is our government is out of control. Our federal government is especially out of control. We're seeing this crazy woke religion, which is telling us to either murder our children or sterilize our children. And we're having this green death cult telling us to cut off our oil and gas production, shutting down our coal-fired power plants, and we're going into a winter where oil prices are skyrocketing, and your average person is struggling. How are they going to afford fuel to heat their homes this winter? How are they going to afford gas to get to work?
Right. And
we have people talking about the green future, we need solar and wind. And so this is madness. We can't be talking about cutting spending by 5%. We need to be talking about something much greater than that. And that is, people need to realize that we're being screwed. All of us are being screwed, and we need to stand up and say no more of this. Right. This is a tactic, pushed on by whoever, the ruling class, if you will, keep us divided, keep us separated. They push all this racism and CRT nonsense. It's like, no. The race doesn't matter. It's not left versus right. It's not R versus D. It's like we're all the same people. We're all the same. We're all from the same mold. We're all the same. And we all need to work together and realize that this division is engineered. It's produced out of nothing. It's all choreographed. And until we stand up and say no more of this and actually demand that we be respected and treated properly, we're going to keep being steamrolled. And I think that's like the big push of what difference about my campaign is that, I'm not playing in the Overton window, right? I'm jumping right outside the Overton window. I don't care what allowable opinion is, because like we're beyond that point. If we're campaigning like it's 2016, then we're wrong.
Right.
And that's what we need to recognize.
So I'm very sensitive. I know that some of my listeners and some of my viewers are not necessarily libertarians, so they don't necessarily follow all of the lingo. So let's be clear on what you mean when you say certain terms. So when you say Overton window, what do you mean?
So Overton window is basically this kind of this manufactured window of allowable opinion, right? So it's like, well, you have the Democrats, like they think that the income tax rate should be so much percent, and then the Republicans think income tax should be this much percent, and it's just this little window where it's like, well, I'm saying like, no, there shouldn't be an income tax, right? It's like, hey, how about it's not that it's this false choice, right? This binary choice that we're presented, which is concocted. It's not real. There's more perspective, or there's more spectrum of actual opinion. And my point is that as libertarians, we need to make point of not getting sucked into the debate of A or B, and be like, well, actually, no, there's C. Right? We're not be focusing on what A or B, because A or B is that's a false choice. It's concocted, and it's a narrative that allows the Democrat to say one thing and the Republican to say everything. This choreographed, like professional wrestling-esque battle that we see on TV.
Right.
As libertarians, we need to recognize like, no. That's part of the control mechanism. That's part of how the panopticon is created. That there's more than just two choices, right? There are 3 or 4 or 5. Like, I'm not just talking about political parties. I'm talking about any idea, any kind of thing, like whether it be gun control or abortion or immigration. It's not just A or B. There's usually way more. Sorry, I'm having my coffee this morning. Minutia and available like opposite choices or solutions to these problems than just what we're presenting.
Right. Yeah, I apologize for that. 7:30 in the morning just kind of was that time, and I get up at like 5 and then get my coffee. So by the time 7:30 rolls around, like I've been up like 2 hours. I don't know what's going on with you guys.
It would have been fine if my internet was working this morning, but I woke up and my internet's like, no, we're not going to work this morning because
So instead of coffee, you're dealing with tech troubles, right? I hear you. So, okay. So when we talk of this Overton window, you're saying that the Keystone Party is largely within that window then of this range of opinion that, okay, this is what we're going to have a conversation on, which is largely dominated by the Republicans and the Democrats. So he's, I want to say he, but the Keystone Party, their candidate, he is still within that range, and you're saying, nope, I'm outside of it because we've got some ideas that you need to hear.
Right.
So how is that resonating, or is it with people when you talk to them?
I mean, people I talk to one-on-one, both right, left, and libertarian, is all thrilled by it. They all love it. I mean, it resonates beautifully, and I expect it with people on the right. I'm from the right myself. I grew up being myself conservative. Now not so much, but. And so I expected that, but it's really blown my mind. I talk to people on the left and how much they like, absolutely. Right. And how much this message of unity and this message of forget all that typical political nonsense and just like focus on like what really is going on.
Right.
And that message really resonates with everyone. And it's just a matter of getting it out there and spreading as far and as wide as possible.
Got it. I like that you brought up that you were previously a conservative or potentially a Republican, I guess, maybe once upon a time. Okay. You're in Pennsylvania, which appears to be a relative stronghold for the Democrat Party. In fact, let's go ahead and pull up something here. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on your screen. So, so what I've got here is the election results from 2018 when Tom Wolf ran, and we see that he got 57.8% of the vote, whereas Scott Wagner, the Republican challenger at that time, got 40.7, so significantly behind. And then and I don't have graphics for these, but 538 has currently Shapiro with 51.5%, and I think this is right, Mastriano trailing at 40.6%. So pretty much an 11 percentage points behind. So since you came from the right,
Yep.
what's your message to Democrat voters, and how are they receiving it? Because I feel like a lot of people, when they come from one or the other, they tend to be better at messaging to that same crowd. So if you came to Libertarian Party from a more liberal background, then you tend to be better at speaking with liberals.
Right.
Whereas if you're more conservative, same thing. But you came from a more conservative background, yet you're dealing with a larger body of people, or people that are largely or more so on the left-leaning side. So how is that message being received? How are you talking to those kind of voters?
So I think it's important to point out too, is that most voters are neither one or the other. Most people are, they're not tied to like some particular party. They might lean one way or another, but most people are not so committed to one position. And those that are largely like a lost cause. I mean, they're playing team sports at this point. So, but when it comes to the middle, and I actually put, to me, talking to the right comes naturally, as you point out, it's second nature. I put a lot of thought into how do I talk to people on the left. And the biggest thing is just one coming from a position of compassion and a position of love. It's really which is really where we're all really coming from at the end of the day. But it's the establishment narrative is that no, the other people hate you. But so coming in a position of compassion, a position of love, and saying that look, the government doesn't care about these things that you care about. The government's using you, and the government's lying to you. And you just look at how much these things haven't changed. Look how much the inner cities have been just further and further impoverished. And why is that? They're talking about inner city violence and talking about guns, but it's there are far more guns in my neighborhood than there are in Philly, and there are no violent crimes here. The problem is the war on drugs, right? Why are we we're rounding up people, specifically young black men, we're rounding up, putting them in prison, taking them away from their families, making them incapable of providing through a legitimate means of work, and force them into the black market. And it's this is a vicious cycle that the state has created. And most people left realize that and recognize that. And you pointed out to them that it's not the guns that are the problem. It's the war on drugs that's the problem. It's why didn't anyone ever talk about that? People realize that's a good point. That's obviously the issue here. Why are we militarizing the police? Why are we equipping police with these weapons of war, if you will, and literally weapons of war, unlike the left claims about civilian firearm ownership, and send them into these communities which they are not part of, right? And this is something that also resonates really well and really strongly. And then too, again, then back to the unity message, being look, all this stuff is this left versus right stuff is all nonsense, right? This is all choreographed. We're all the same. We can all love each other. We can all be one big community. And this division, this hate is pushed on us by a select few, the 0.01%, if you will, that needs us to be divided for their continued power and position. And it resonates, surprisingly well with the left. I mean, you'd think the left are a bunch of crazy woke idiots, but and by and large, most people on the left are not at all like that. Most people on the left are very reasonable and rational people, and are very easy to talk to. And as I said, position of compassion and love, and it's really no more difficult.
Gotcha. I brought up your two opponents, and I say two. I know there's actually four, but I'm talking about the major two, Shapiro and Mastriano. Those are the ones that are going to give you the biggest run for your money, if you will. I have a question here from the audience, and so let's talk about this. Let me pull that up here. That libertarian lady is wanting to know: are the two clowns in PA, and I presume right and left, or I'm sorry, Republican, Democrat, allowing you on the debate stage? So how's that working out? Because we've seen, like in Georgia, they did get some debates for the governor and the lieutenant governor, and then also the Senate. So are you getting any debate time? Any media
No,
time?
I don't really think they're debating each other. The
Okay.
last I heard, there was Mastriano was really pushing Shapiro for debate, and he was pushing back on it. I don't know if they ever agreed to one, but yeah, they if you think about it, like there's no incentive for either of them to debate anyone. So
Right.
it's amazing that they in Georgia they allowed Shane Hazel on the debate stage.
Right.
But yeah, no, they largely ignore us. And there's actually just a PA Live, which is a local news outlet, just totally shunned us. They allow the other candidates on in like not like a debate, it's more like a meet the candidates type of thing. They just pretend like we didn't exist.
Right.
So,
Yeah, and I think in your case it's even harder than in Georgia. In Georgia, at least, I believe both Shane and Chase Oliver are at a point where they can force a runoff. I'm not sure. I don't know what the polling results are for the lieutenant governor, and they may just be on the same ticket. So I'm not entirely certain there, but so they're forcing a runoff. So you kind of it's harder to ignore them. Whereas like in Pennsylvania, as we saw, the difference between the R and the D is so great that it's hard to, I guess it makes it easier to impact them. So are you finding alternative media that you can get on and kind of spread the word out?
Yeah, we're doing
other than this great podcast, with this great host here.
Yeah, we've been trying to get into like local publications and around the state, and we have some strategies coming up that we're working on. So
got it.
Just to try to do a little more of like a guerrilla campaign this weekend.
Are there any opportunities for like town halls or anything that you can do?
Yeah, there's actually a number. The big one that we're looking at are through universities and through schools, which I think are the best place. Is the end goal here is not really to get elected, but it's to plant that seed in the minds of others, and the most productive, the most profit rich population is going to be the younger population. So
right,
just I got I got the mind virus when I was in college from Dr. Ron Paul.
Right.
I think it's important that we do the same. We focus on the same. So that's we're focusing on go try to talk at some schools.
Yeah, I know. I think that makes sense. I think so. My opinion of how a party should operate is, one, they exist to run candidates, and but not necessarily for the same reason, depending where you are. Like in the case of Georgia, clearly there's an opportunity for them to force a runoff. And so they're going to run their campaign in a little differently than if you're in a state where, hey, the Republican and the Democrat, the difference between them is 11 percentage points. So that doesn't matter that they have that kind of a gap. I think the Libertarian Party should still run candidates. They just may need to reevaluate the process, or not the process, but the goals that they're trying to achieve. Like say, hey, look, a win for us is even more challenging than it is maybe in some other states. So we're going to take this approach, and this is how we're going to run the campaign in order to meet this goal. So so having said that, what is the measure of success for you? Because you just stated it clearly. You said, look, we're not going to win. but there's got to be some measure of success. So
ideally, we want to get 3% of the vote, 2 to 3%. I can't really get a straight answer on this. I want to say it's 3% for the to maintain a minor party status in any of the statewide contests. So that'd be mine or be the Senate race. So which we are in the realm of doing.
I mean, with a face like that, how could you not vote for her daddy, right?
Exactly. And we have a pin that says vote from Marmalade. Oh,
Right.
there goes my microphone. That's enough. That's enough. 1 second.
Looks like somebody had plenty of coffee, right?
Yeah, right. Anyway, where was
All
I?
right.
Yeah,
So we were just kind of go ahead.
yeah, and as a party, we're much more really interested in promoting the more local races, especially the state rep seats, which there is some possibility of us making an upset or even potentially taking some and then even further down ballot and then local races. We have won town council seats, we've won mayor seats. So Pennsylvania, we've been very, very successful in our electoral efforts. So my campaign doesn't take a lot of resources or effort from the state party, because like the state party, we're more interested in the more productive elections, which really are, like I said, the state rep seats and the town seats. So
right,
which we are making some quite exciting progress on.
So tell me that now this is kind of not related to your campaign specifically, but I know in the Libertarian Party there have been some criticism after our shift in leadership, and one of the criticisms specific to Pennsylvania was the number of candidates that had been put up for voters to choose from across the state. Right now, and I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but the how do the numbers compare now for people that are running throughout Pennsylvania versus prior to the change in leadership?
So the question is how many people are running now versus prior to the leadership change?
Yeah. I mean, is it more, fewer, or?
So we have more people on the ballot now, I think, than ever in PA history, or at least in the last 20, 30 years, in the history of the LPPA. And we did so with all volunteer petitioners, which was never something that's done in the past. In the past, we've always paid petitioners to gather signatures. This year, we did it, all volunteers. And there's more excitement and there's more movement. And a lot of criticisms we get from the key store owners, the sort of losers, if you will. Is purely manufactured, and it's wishful thinking on their part. But by and large, that the leadership change has sparked a massive uptick in interest and excitement and movement in the party. And we have so many people running, we have so many people going to be on the ballot, and it's really it's a historic time in the LPPA's history.
Awesome. Well, let's get to that. Let's get to the bill review segment. So let me play my little segue, because I enjoy my segue, and it gets me a chance to get my own little one in on the screen, even though he is probably still asleep. And then we will be right back, and we will discuss the bill during the bill review section.
But I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
All right, folks, the bill review section of this episode, or of this podcast, is about talking about bills that the candidates are interested in. These bills could be related to the role that they're running for, or for something else, just something that happens to weigh heavy on their heart. The goal of the bill review isn't really to dissect and talk. I'm not a lawyer. Most of the guests here that come on the show are also not lawyers, but we want to normalize the idea of reading a bill and somewhat understanding it, and then expecting that same thing from our elected representatives. So let's bring Matt back in, and we're going to discuss the guard bill. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it. Maybe I haven't had enough coffee as well. Defend the guard. That's what it was. I was looking for that word. Defend the guard. So let's talk about the defend the guard and why you chose that one.
So I'm a huge proponent of defend the guard. Frankly, I don't think it's legislation that should be needed. I think it's built into the U.S. Constitution. But basically what it does is it says that the state governors, they cannot put their National Guard forces into federal service for a foreign war without a official congressional declaration of war. which
Okay.
is in line with the U.S. Constitution. The powers delegated to the Congress is it was Article 1, Section 8, I believe, of the U.S. Constitution. It gives Congress the sole authority of declaring war. And unless Congress has declared war, then we should not be putting our forces overseas. And the National Guard is unique in that it is under the control of the state governors, and that they have the authority to say, no, I'm not sending my boys and my girls to go fight for this conflict that the president of the United States just arbitrarily decided he wants to fight.
Mhm.
So the Defend the Guard is a piece of legislation which codifies that into state law that requires that the governor is not permitted to put the National Guard forces into federal service without this declaration of war. And like I said, I don't think it should be necessary, but we are so broken and backwards in terms of not having a declaration of war since World War II that's where we are. And we need, this is basically a bit of nullification where, the states need to dig what power they have, what sovereignty they have, and stand up to the federal government.
Right. I'm pulling up the Defend the Guard website right now. So there we have Defend the Guard. So you can actually, just for people that are listening in or watching, you can go to defendtheguard.us and you can find out more information about that. One of the things that I wanted to point out here is if I hover over this map, it's got a map of the 50 states, and they have you can click on them and find out what's going on in those particular states. So when I click on Pennsylvania, it looks like they do not yet have a chapter. So is there anything that's happening that you can talk about as far as getting a chapter in there or getting legislation written, at least to forward this idea in the state of Pennsylvania?
We've been making some efforts as a state party towards that end, but we are working on it. We're working with actually some state legislatures, as far as I know, to get that end. But it's a long process, and hoping to use this campaign as an effort to push that along.
Gotcha. And what motivated you? Was it just the fact that you are a former service member, correct? Or are you current?
Yeah, former
Okay.
national member of the National Guard, Army National Guard. And it's just personal, importance to me. We tell kids that, hey, you need some help paying for college, you need help paying for your home, you want to provide for your baby and your baby mama or baby daddy. Sign up. It's only 1 week in a month and 2 weeks a year. Easy peasy, no big deal, and learn some new life skills and jobs and yada yada yada. And you get these kids to sign up, and we send them up to basic training and AIT, and then guess what? We need you in the Middle East for 18 months. So say goodbye to your family that you sign up for to provide for it, and you're going to be going to Afghanistan or Kuwait or Qatar, whatever they call it these days.
Right.
And you're going to be away from your family for these times, and you're going to be traumatized in the process. And I've seen this time and time again firsthand. I see young kids just taken, very noble, pure of heart young kids taken and crushed and destroyed for nothing, for nothing.
Right.
Because pure politics of our federal government, and it's disgusting and it needs to stop.
Would this legislation end all activity or just war zone? And what I mean by that, I'm a fellow Army National Guard member myself.
Right.
And I had multiple MOSs. So I started out with radio comsec repair, and then eventually landed on, somewhat of a lightweight grunt. So I was 11 Bravo light infantry. And during that time, I actually ended up getting deployed to Bosnia. Now, this was in 2002. So like the war had long been over. And I think they considered it I'm trying to remember the status that it was in exactly. I know I got hazard pay, but I don't think it was considered an active war zone necessarily. And while I was there, nothing was happening. Right. So would it end that kind of activity for National Guard members as well?
So that's a good question. I have to look at particularly each state, how it's being enacted, but in general, it's supposed to be, in a role of conflict. So, but like, as we know, a lot of the National Guard deployments, they're not really in a position of conflict. Guys being deployed to Qatar, and it's like, well, that's not a conflict zone, but and in my mind, at least as governor, I mean, I would not tolerate my forces being deployed overseas at all, right?
Okay.
Outside maybe disaster relief, maybe, but really, I think the National Guard belongs serving the community as we were promised to that we were signing up for. So that's, in my mind, that's how it should be. How it's enacted in each individual state, I really can't say.
Gotcha. No, that's fair. And I think that states would probably differ in how they took that approach, as they're introducing this Defend the Guard legislation. So it's and let's be clear, just so when people are listening, this doesn't necessarily prevent any use of the National Guard. According to their website, it specifically says Defend the Guard legislation would prohibit a state's National Guard units from being deployed into active combat without a formal declaration of war by Congress.
Right.
So that's the big kicker, is that we're in all these conflicts without actually having declared, a state of war, an active state of war with that country. And so we kind of weasel our way into using troops overseas under some other, rationale. And so what this legislation would do is say, nope, we are not sending our young men and women to an area where they may not come home from without having said, this is an active war that we actively need to be involved in. And I think that's I think it's very libertarian legislation, in my opinion.
Yeah, for sure.
So
in my mind, it's a step in the right direction. I'm
Right.
more extreme. I'm devoutly anti-war, but
Right.
but yeah, it's the minimum we can do, and especially for the Guard, and being a member of the Guard yourself. I mean, I'm sure it rings home in terms of like what these young guys are told and what they're promised and what they actually receive.
Right. Which, we were promised a lot and received very, very little. every
received
service
something.
member knows you listened to your recruiter, didn't you?
Yeah, right.
So, fun story, actually, just to kind of, make things a little bit lighter. When I joined, I needed a secret clearance, and my recruiter was like, dude, this could get you out of speeding tickets. And like every young guy, I believed him. And so I got pulled over one time, but I was trying to figure out, like, how do you lay this down? Like, how do you put this out without being so obvious? So I was just sitting there in his squad car in the passenger seat while he's writing up the ticket. And I thought I could just throw it out there. And I was like, man, I hope this doesn't, interfere with my secret clearance that I'm supposed to be having. That's trying to be all sly, right? And he laughed at me. The officer laughed while he kept writing his ticket. And he said, what secrets do you have, or something like that? And so I was like, all right, well, that one didn't work. So I got the ticket, whatever.
My good friend is a 68 whiskey, a comp medic, female, and she would get tickets all the time with her military ID. And I was like, sweet, get tickets. Now I've got many tickets with I pull my CAC out, and they're like, no, that's great. Here's a ticket. I'm like, oh, great.
Yep. So
the female card is a big part of it too, apparently.
Yeah. My sister got out of way more tickets than I did. I don't think I got out of any. Maybe one. I might have got a warning on one. So,
yeah.
It was unrelated to anything.
Right. I'm trying to drill at like 2:00 in the morning in uniform, and I get pulled over and get a ticket, and it's like, you'll give your fellow police officer a pass, but I mean, here I am.
Right.
Not that I support any of that. I mean, I don't believe in it's your fellow status, but
Sure. Yeah. No, I totally understand. Like, hey, when you're in the middle of trying to get when you're in the middle of getting a ticket, you're like, well, what can I do to get out of this? Like, do I have that spare bee in the that old trick of having a dead bee in like a matchbook or matchbox, and then you pull it out and be like, oh man, I was swatting at a bee, I'm sorry. Like all these crazy tricks that people tell you to try, and none of them ever seem to work for me. So like, whatever. But all right, so we're rounding out to the end of this, and I know you've got to get you've got dad duty that you got to take care of. So any final words from Matt and as far as like where people can find you, how they can help you, what else they need to know that maybe I missed?
So yeah, check out my website, matthackenburg.com. I see it's on the bottom of the screen there. You can find out my issues and where to follow me and where to donate, important part. You can also follow me on Twitter at Matt Hackenburg. You can find all my my wonderful opinions and commentary. But yeah, by and large, this is think this is the time is now. We're coming upon a precipice. We're coming up upon a major change of history, not just Pennsylvania history or U.S. history or world history, but all world history really. And we as libertarians, we have the ideas that we need to push, and we need to get these ideas out there because we're going to see a major change in how the world operates. And we better hope and pray and work that these ideas of liberty, of individual ownership, personal ownership, are the ones that succeed. We don't want to descend into this totalitarian nightmare that we see over the horizon. I'm very optimistic. I think we're going to succeed. I think everything's going to be great. I think people are waking up. And I think the time is now. Time is now to stand up and fight and to take what is ours.
Awesome. That's great. And I want to thank people for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I want you to tune in next week. Next week, I recorded. You may recall that I had some strong words to say about a week ago about an Arizona candidate, and I had him on. We did a pre-recording, so I'm going to be putting that out next week. That would be Mark Victor, the Senate candidate out of Arizona. I'm also going to be doing some reviews of some of the candidates in Georgia and their time on the debate stage, and then I've got to finalize the northeastern area of the United States and talk about the delegates versus the wow, this coffee thing. I'm just going to rely on the coffee thing. I'm going to blame it on that. I'm saying I haven't had enough coffee here. But where I was talking about the difference between the delegates and the candidates per state. So we'll be finishing up that with the last region of the United States, and that's the Northeastern. And I believe Pennsylvania is in that group that I have. So I'll be talking about that. And then also, who else knows what will come up with next week, but I hope you enjoyed it. And that is all for this week. So I want you to find other episodes at libertydad.com. Those are going to be the audio only versions. You can find the archived video episodes at youtube.libertydad.com. And you can also connect with me at LibertyDad on Facebook, LibertyDadPod on Twitter, or email to libertydadpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. Even if it's hate mail, go right ahead. And remember, if you are a champion of liberty, your business is people and your product is liberty. I want you to have a great week.